Daily Fantasy Edge. Peter Jennings, of course, go by CSURAM88 across the daily fantasy industry. And as always, joined by Al Zeidenfeld and Adam Levitan. Happy New Year's, boys. Levitan, it's probably a sad day for you since we're moving on past the glorious 2018 where you just owned the four-man.
What am I going to do without my $72 every week? You know what I mean? I need that 72 each week. No, it's sad, man. I mean, full slates are fun, and the NFL is by far the best fantasy sport. I think it's easy to get burnt out towards the end, and I think a lot of people that are grinding this all the time, myself included, can get burnt out towards the end. But then like a month will go by, and there'll be no fantasy football, and everybody's going to be like, man, I can't wait until fantasy football is back, because it really is the best fantasy sport. So it's a little bittersweet, but I do think there's good slates. There are two-game slates. There are the 4-game main slate, obviously, and then there's all the showdown slates. And if you want to play all of them, you can certainly get some really good action. So yeah, man, it's bittersweet, but the playoff weeks are always fun, I think.
Al, how's the new year going for you, and what's life like in the Twitch streets?
Everything's going well. You know, we had a little low-key New Year's Eve because the kids, obviously, I'm not going out or anything. So we watched a movie, and then they got to stay up late and watch the ball drop at 9 p.m. out here on the West Coast, which is obviously New Year's on the East Coast. So they were very excited to do that. It was just, everything was just a complete joy. And we had a really great time, and I'm ready for 2019.
All right. I guess with that, we gotta dive into the games here. Levitan, we got the Colts and Texans highest total on the board as the first game. A lot of great plays here. What are the news and notes?
Yeah, let me just say something about the slate real quick before we talk about this game specifically. I think it is a difficult and kind of interesting slate because a lot of these teams are really difficult to project, right? Like, we really struggle to figure out Chicago's game plans on a week-to-week basis. Like, Eagles running back by committee, and Baltimore's defense and the way they're playing with Lamar Jackson is unique. You know, a lot of these teams that, like Seattle also, I think is really difficult to project at times too. So, and it's a lot of matchups where we, like, if these games were on the main slate, like, we'd just be like, pass, you know, like Seattle, Dallas, you know, outside of Zeke or whatever, really, pass. But on a 4-game slate or on a 2-game slate, if you're playing it, obviously, it's way, way, way different. So the exception to this, a game that we would be excited about on the main slate, is Colts and Texans, right? Like, two really good rush defenses, two susceptible secondaries, two good quarterbacks, two teams that are willing to play fast. So it just stands out in a big, big way versus the other games. Unfortunately, it's the first game. So it's not always optimal to like load up your lineups on these kind of slates with the early game, because you want to leave yourself options for late swap. But if you know what I mean, Al, like, I feel like we can't get away from this game. Before I get to the injuries, like, I just feel like we can't get away from this game despite wanting to leave room for late swap. You know what I mean?
I know, it's a weird conundrum, right? Because it doesn't matter what time the games go off, but you do want to leave yourself PMR, and you do want to leave yourself flexibility. But the two Sunday games are really projectably low-scoring, defensive-oriented. There's some spots that we can pick on in those games, but not really load up on players. I don't want a game stack of either game on Sunday, especially considering that this Indianapolis and Houston game could have like 59 points at halftime, which would be really bad if you faded that.
Right. Peter, any thoughts on overall game theory for this slate before I get into the injuries?
I agree with you overall. It's pretty tricky. It sounds like I might like the Seahawks-Cowboys game a smidge better than you, but this is clearly the best game, and it is a tough slate. And you make a good point. I think the biggest thing that you can leverage in the playoffs is maximizing late swap and really pivoting, because it's pretty easy to figure out who your opponents have, and you have a ton of time in between games, unlike the traditional full slates where you have some chances to swap if you need to, but it's in between the 1 o'clock and the 4 o'clock Eastern games. And oftentimes, you'll still have players going in the 1 o'clock games when the 4:05 games lock. So it's a slate where you want to be maximizing that, but the GTO strategy this week most likely is going to be jamming in quite a few players from this game, which, as we're recording here on Thursday afternoon, has one of the highest total. It has the highest total on the board, but it's like 7-8 points higher than any other game, depending where you're looking.
Right. All right. And two really big injuries in this game. Two of the biggest injuries on the slate, in my opinion. We know T.Y. Hilton is going to play. Is he going to be 100%? It looked like he aggravated that ankle sprain on Sunday night against the Titans in week 17, Frank Reich said that we have to use T.Y. Hilton selectively. We have to get other guys involved. That could all be coach speak. It does suck kind of that he has a shorter week this week considering the game's on Saturday. If T.Y. Hilton is anywhere near 100%, he's obviously one of the best plays on the board. I think you can project him for 9-10 targets pretty easily, and that's going to be second on the slate behind only DeAndre Hopkins, given the spot that Keenan Allen is in. So, I think a really good spot for T.Y. Hilton. I'm just really want to see what we can find out in terms of his health. And then the other injury, the sneakier injury that I'm watching is this Kiki Kute thing. I don't know, I never want to use guys in their first game back from a hamstring pull, but Kiki Kute pulled his hamstring during training camp, didn't play until week 4. First game, 15 targets. That was with Will Fuller playing. Then he aggravates it again a few weeks later, misses a few weeks, comes back and gets 9 targets in his first game back after that. So they've shown a willingness to throw Kiki Kute right back into the mix. And this is kind of the way that you attack the Colts defense. They want to push everything underneath. That's where Kiki Kute roams. So I think at 4K or whatever Kute is, if we know he's healthy, I think he's pretty strong, but it's going to be tight, Al, because they're calling him a game time decision right now.
I mean, and I never play this other kid, and it's Lamar Miller, but we've talked in recent weeks about how many passes Indy funnels to running backs, how many targets, how many passes. They're basically like, a poor man's Atlanta Falcons in that respect. So I understand that Lamar Miller at his price is going to be really high owned. I think that there's a couple of other guys in that range that might be a little bit less that I'd rather have. And maybe it's just my own personal bias that I just don't roster Lamar Miller because it's very rare that he has a really, really big game. But does he need to have one at 4,900?
I don't think so. I mean, I love Lamar Miller this week relative to some of the other options. I think he's a really strong play. The downside is both the Colts and the Texans play really good run defense. Marlon Mack on the other side has a really tough matchup. And Adam, you've been tweeting about the splits with the center in and out for the Colts, Kelly. So that's another thing to monitor. It sounds like he's going to play. But the big guy that you have to jam in, who's going to be the most heavily owned player on the slate, is DeAndre Hopkins, coming off one of the most impressive seasons, 0 recorded drops on the year. He should go absolutely ham. Is he going to be more heavily owned than Zeke, do you think, Adam? Or are they going to be pretty similar? Or do you think Zeke ends up being more heavily owned than DeAndre Hopkins?
I think I have Hopkins 50 to 60% and Zeke 60 to 70. I mean, they're both going to be massively, massively owned. There's no doubt about that because it's not hard to fit them. And on this kind of slate, getting a very, very locked in points is not going to be easy. And DeAndre Hopkins, we saw it last week. Yeah, he's facing the Jaguars. Doesn't matter. Had 12 catches for 160 yards or something crazy. I think the Colts did a good job. I actually played DeAndre Hopkins in cash last time these two teams met. DeAndre Hopkins only caught 4 balls for 30 yards, got sucked out late with a touchdown. The Colts scheme can limit DeAndre Hopkins, but that's not something I'm really worried about on this slate. He's obviously a phenomenal play. We didn't mention Eric Ebron, who I think you can make a case is a better play than Zach Ertz this week, given on paper matchups, Al. I mean, Ertz is obviously an awesome player. Chicago is one of the best tight end defenses. Houston has struggled against tight ends. I think I prefer Ebron to Ertz, but it's certainly close.
I mean, Houston's allowing the most tight end points from a DVP's perspective. They've allowed 74% of passes to be completed to tight ends, and that number rises when other teams get into the red zone to 81.8%. And you know that Ebron has the most end zone targets of anybody else in the league this year, so a high possibility of actually completing those, or a higher possibility against Houston of actually completing those. And he comes at a price discount to Zach Ertz. Now, Pete, I know, is going to play Zach Ertz because his brand is tied to Ertz right now.
My brand is tied to Ertz, but I prefer Ebron over Ertz, which pains me. No. I love Zach Ertz, but yeah, I'm going to play Ebron, I think, over Ertz as of right now.
One more injury note. Go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, one more injury note. Ryan Grant hurt his toe in week 17, and that's going to, it seems like he's going to miss, and that is going to lock in Dontrell Inman and Chester Rogers behind T.Y. Hilton. If you're game stacking this, you're going to have to think about things like that, but it's still, those guys, even though they'd be number 2/3 wideouts, they'd still be behind Hilton, Ebron, and probably Nyheim Hines too, who we didn't mention yet, but Nyheim Hines, kind of a poor man's Tariq Cohen if the game turns really pass heavy, Hines will play a lot. He already plays on passing downs over Marlon Mack. And really that's the concern with playing Marlon Mack. Yeah, Houston has a tough rush defense. And also Marlon Mack, I think is capable in the pass game, but they don't really use him in the pass game at all because they like what Nyheim Hines gives them there. So yeah, there's a lot to chew on in this game for sure.
What percentage of Watson's touchdowns are going to go to a wide receiver named DeAndre?
Are you referring to DeAndre Carter?
And DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah. I think Depends if Kute plays, Carter might not play a lot.
Because of Kute?
Because of Kute, yes. We have
Jim Bob Kute. They run 3 wide a lot, don't they?
Yeah.
Or at least a good enough percentage of the time that for 3.3K, this kid's going to run some routes.
Yeah. So the concern for me is DeAndre Carter's like 5'8", 180. He can like only play in the slot, and that's where they like to use Kute too. So I don't know what they're going to do. I'd have to look into that.
Especially with Thomas out. Now we've got to figure out a different rotation.
Yeah. Right. I mean, they're just so thin at wideout. Obviously, they lost Will Fuller. They bring in Pete's boy, Demaryius Thomas. Then he has the Pete injury, blows out his Achilles, and now they're just scraping for wideouts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to just quickly talk on Nyheim Hines. He's probably my overall favorite GPP running back. You stack him either with Andrew Luck or against Deshaun Watson. I think it makes a lot of sense. The Texans get up early. That's where he could be leveraged in the game in a big way. They drafted him with the intent of him being that pass-catching running back. So that's why he plays over Mack, who I think in most backfields, he's definitely capable, would be kind of an every down back. So they love Nyheim Hines and what he offers. He's dynamic in the passing game, really cheap. And if game flow goes right, he could have a huge game. And I think the secondary receivers are all in play, given that this game has the highest potential to shoot out. Let's move to the Seahawks and Cowboys, though. I actually like this game. A couple of the matchups I think stand out. Obviously, Zeke is going to be mega chalk, Adam, but what are the news and notes?
Yeah, I mean, 2 teams that really want to run the football. I mean, especially Seattle. Like, Seattle was able to hold their opponents to the 3rd fewest plays per game this year because, I mean, they're playing like literally 1960s football, like run, and then be super efficient in the pass game with Russ. The question is, can they do that with Zeke on the other side? I mean, Zeke didn't play in week 17, talked about how rested he felt. Seattle has a really good defense, but they are beatable in terms of yards per carry, in terms of running up the middle. I guess the question on Zeke, Al, and we can get some other news and notes here in a second, but I think the question on Zeke, Al, he's going to be 60, 70% owned in virtually every tournament, high stakes, low stakes. He's just so easy to fit given the lack of other high-priced options on the slate outside of DeAndre Hopkins. How do you feel about playing Zeke at that price?
I think
at that ownership. Sorry.
I mean, okay. I think he's easy to fit based on price.
Yeah.
I mean, you have 3 choices if you're playing Zeke. You can't play if you're playing multiple lineups, let's say, right? So if you're playing like 10 or 20 lineups, you're playing 100 lineups or 150 lineups. You're not going to play 30% Ezekiel Elliott. You're either going to play 0, you're going to play 60 or 70% of him, or you're going to play lock button 100%. Like, those are your 3 options. I think anything in between 0 and 70 is probably wrong. I think that there are easy ways to leverage Zeke in the case that he doesn't get into the end zone and hits a floor game of like 14. There are other ways that this game can go off. You can obviously stack Dak with Cooper or Dak with Cooper Jarwin. And I'll let Adam speak to the increase in Jarwin's role recently, as he did so eloquently on Twitter earlier this week. I like that face. What was that?
It's just scary. I mean, Blake Jarwin against like the league's best tight end defense, But yeah, certainly has had a role. I'm just
saying, if you're looking for a leverage play, I mean, that's why Zeke is going to be 70% owned, is because he's the easy route. But that doesn't always work out that way, right? Yeah. So that's the highest probability outcome. But if you want to leverage that, and we're talking about for tournaments only here, if you're trying to get to the top, you have to know that, okay, if I'm going to leverage Zeke and 70% ownership, and he has a floor game for him, which is what, between 12 and 18 fantasy points, which won't kill you in cash, but if he has 12 to 18 and Jarwin has a multiple touchdown game like he did in week 17, or if Cooper has a multiple touchdown game with one of them at least being a long touchdown, or Dak runs 1 touchdown and throws for 2 or 3, 1 to Beasley, 1 to Cooper, 1 to Jarwin, just something where he spreads the ball out, right? There's a lot of different possible outcomes in a game like this that don't involve Ezekiel Elliott getting 30-plus fantasy points.
Yeah, I think Zeke is a really tricky one in tournaments just because he's approaching such high ownership. Obviously, he has the highest equity of any running back on the slate. And most of the time, you're going to need Zeke to have any chance in tournaments, especially with the lack of other high-end options. But the reason I like this game, obviously the downside Adam outlined. I mean, there could be there could be very few plays for both teams given the run heavy nature and like control the clock type of play style that both teams have. However, I think Seattle is really beatable in the secondary. They have a really good front seven. They've been good versus tight end, but they have not been good versus wide receivers.
Here we go.
Say
you guys waiting for me to say Amari Cooper?
Yeah. Just let it go. Let your
I
hands
was
go.
actually going to talk about Gallup a little bit. Dak Prescott. I mean, these guys are all pretty solid plays, I think. And on the other side, Seattle obviously wants to run, but if the game script is Dallas getting up early, it could have more potential. And I obviously, if this game was on a normal slate, I would not be excited to play guys, but the Chargers-Ravens, the Ravens are going to control the clock. It's really hard to play Chargers versus that defense. You have the same problem with the Eagles versus the Bears, and the Bears are hard to figure out where to go with. So to me, this is the second best game just because we know which players to go after. I think Carson's a good play. I think Zeke's a good play. And then the receivers for Dallas, I think are all great options. And I should point out Tyler Lockett as well. We've had the highest catch rate. Russell Wilson to Tyler Lockett was the highest catch rate in the NFL this year. So pretty good plays overall in this game. Just pace and overall play count is the concern.
Yeah. And I think from a talent perspective, I mean, Dallas has a pretty talented defense, right? Like on a normal slate, we wouldn't be looking to attack this Dallas defense, but Russ has shown such incredible efficiency to Lockett, to David Moore. And, you could say Ezekiel Elliott is one of the only guys on the slate that's a lock to touch the ball 20 times. You could make a pretty good case that Chris Carson's going to touch the ball 20 times also. I'm not excited about playing him in Dallas in this spot against really good Leighton Vander Esch and all these guys on Dallas, but he's certainly going to get the volume there. Al mentioned Blake Jarwin. I mean, certainly a role change, right? Like earlier in the year, he was just part of a committee, wasn't running a lot of routes. Last 4 weeks, run a route on 68% of Dak's dropbacks, has a 15% target share, and like he's 3,300. We're going to talk about some other cheaper tight ends. We have questions about Hunter Henry. Maybe you could make a case for Dallas Goedert or something like that, or Mark Andrews. But in terms of the way they're being used, Jarwin sticks out. It's just such a tough matchup. And I think Michael Gallup is interesting too. He's running routes really deep down the field. So like you don't need a lot of volume for Michael Gallup to pay off.
I mean, we talked about this with Seattle's tight end pass defense a few weeks ago, right? Like, it's not a defense I want to pick on, but as you mentioned, a bunch of the cheaper tight ends this week, there's nothing, right? So now we've got a guy that at least has a 15% market share, albeit in a terrible DVP situation. The only thing that scares me is that he doesn't have 2 T's in his name, and we know that that's the key to unlocking the Seattle defense versus tight ends.
Yeah. That's funny. The other thing about this game, I think to me it's the second best game, but it's close. The other problem though is it's on Saturday as well, so you lose even more late swap. If you load up with this game and the first game, then you're just waiting. And I do think a lot of your opponents will make mistakes not making the optimal swaps, and it's really easy to make the optimal swaps when you have a full night in between all the games. So let's keep it moving to the Chargers at Ravens. Ravens have been playing some amazing football. They could make some noise here in the playoffs. 2 teams I was really high on down the stretch. The Chargers kind of stumbled a bit, but still one of the most talented teams. And great news, Hunter Henry, it looks like he will be playing on a limited basis, Adam.
Yeah. I mean, it just sucks for the Chargers, right? Like you go 12-4, you have this amazing year, and your reward is to go across the country to the NFL's best defense against a team that holds the ball for like 40 minutes a game. I mean, it's just the NFL playoff system needs to be revamped. Like the Chargers are so much better than I don't want to rile up Patriots Nation, but I'll just say this. If the Patriots were in the AFC West this year, there's no way the Patriots would have gotten a bye.
Shots fired.
That's my opinion. I mean, Hunter Henry to me is one of the bigger question marks on the slate. Incredibly talented guy. Blew out his ACL 7.5 months ago. I know modern science is amazing. I'm skeptical that he can come back and like be a difference maker 7 months removed from an ACL tear. Anthony Lynn said that if he plays Hunter Henry will be on a snap count. I presume that will be high leverage situations, third downs, pass downs, and he's 2,500. So you can make a case for Hunter Henry with that, but it's super thin, man. I'm going to need more information before I can project him for more than like 10 snaps or 15 snaps.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, how many snaps do you honestly think he's going to play?
Yeah. I mean, 10 to 15, but if he runs 10 to 15 routes, like, you know.
And they're all in the red zone.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
What if he gets the Antonio Gates treatment from last year, right? Where like he's not on the field, but when he is on the field, it's in these really high leverage spots inside the 5. And like he just gets end zone targets. What if he gets like 2 or 3 end zone targets this game, and those are his only targets? He's like the Jerome Bettis of tight ends.
Yeah. Then he's a good play.
Yeah, I guess, but like I don't know how much we can invest in Hunter Hurst. You know, I don't know if I want Triple H this week. It's just too scary. I was going to do a whole Triple H thing. I was going to drink water and spit it up in the air. And I decided against it.
I saw you
saw like I was like chomping at the bit while Adam was talking. I was like, should I do it? Nah, I'm not going to do it.
Hey, you're not even excited about the play, though. You can only spit the water in the air if you're excited about the play.
I mean, you can always spit the water in the air. It's just, we're putting on a show here, Adam. We're supposed to educate and entertain at the same time.
Let's talk about Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's a real.
He's the play. Yeah,
he's the
one play.
But Jackson, Luck and Watson stand out from that game, right? But Jackson's price, I think Jackson might be the cash game quarterback. We saw his ceiling game. I've talked about that. We've all talked about how, hey, we see the immense rushing upside. But when he gets 2 touchdowns rushing, I mean, we could talk about a huge game. Unfortunately, Josh Allen also went completely ham. So he was the key last week. But I mean, I think he's a really, really nice play. The Chargers, they do have a really good defense. I think they're better to kind of rush the passer. But, the Ravens could give a couple extra carries to Lamar Jackson. I think they've been really smart about using him selectively. Now it's in the playoffs. And, I mean, obviously it's a must-win. So, Adam, how does Jackson rank, and will he be your starting quarterback in your cash game lineup?
I mean, Lamar Jackson still hasn't attempted more than 25 passes in a single game in his NFL career, but he has at least 11 carries, and I think there's upside for a lot more, as you mentioned, in this spot. So yeah, the price differential certainly sticks out on Lamar Miller. I haven't made any lineups yet, so I'm not sure how much that 1K makes sense. That's going to be my go-to on the pod from now on. I'm just going to say I haven't made any lineups yet, so I have no idea what...
just excuses himself.
You did say that on the solo pod. You talk about making lineups on Saturday night. So
yeah, exactly.
Good alibi. I like it.
Yeah. So
I'm still going to ask all the time though if they're in your cash game lineup, just for reference.
Yeah, Lamar is for sure a good play. It's just like obviously a lot of people are going to play naked Lamar. I am tempted to pair Lamar with Mark Andrews, who was Baker Mayfield's tight end / wide receiver at Oklahoma, caught 62 balls from Mayfield in 2017, ran a 4.67. I believe the last time these two teams played, if I'm not mistaken, Mark Andrews broke off like a 60-yard pass. I mean, dude is real fast for his size. So, it's not a great play. He might only see like 2-3 targets or something, but it's hard with Lamar Jackson. You're only going to attempt 20 passes. There's not a lot of targets to go around. I think more people are going to play Lamar naked.
Indeed. But Lamar Jackson has the 6th most rush attempts in the NFL during the 7 weeks that he's been the starting quarterback. You're essentially getting an RB1 here. You're getting a guy who's going to run. I'm sorry. I couldn't carry on. I made Adam crack up laughing. My one goal this season. I finally hit it. Pete's losing it as well.
The sick part is that, like,
you got me.
99% of the audience has no idea why you're mentioning Joel Embiid.
You missed the one where I said he might have during the first game where they said he might have 59 points at halftime and it would suck if you faded him.
Oh, I did miss that one.
I've been dropping Easter eggs this whole pod.
Oh man, that was high quality stuff right there.
Anyway, back to business. Lamar Jackson, the 6th most rush attempts during the NFL in the 7 weeks that he's been starting. You're essentially getting an RB1. Adam is correct. They basically do the exact same thing with him every week. He throws between 20 and 25 times. Maybe he hits a long touchdown, but maybe not. We were really close to his ceiling game in week 17, where he had the 2 rushing touchdowns, had another fumble inside the 10-yard line, and had another one called back. So he could have had 4 rushing touchdowns. My issue here in this game is not Lamar Jackson. It's what Lamar Jackson does to the Ravens offense and what that means for the Chargers offense. They've been leading the league with 35 plus 35 minutes and 47 seconds of time of possession since he took over, which just means that they're hogging the ball just like Dallas did a few years ago. We pointed this out on the pod a couple of weeks ago. What that meant for opposing defenses that were playing Dallas was, and Dallas was a bad defense, was that we didn't want to play them because he didn't have as many snaps. Well, now you're getting less snaps and against a ridiculously good defense. I know they played recently. You do have Melvin Gordon. You do have Keenan Allen. Triple H is back. But I don't want any Chargers in this game. I just don't see a breakout spot. I want Lamar. I want the defense also. Maybe a shot at Andrews. Maybe a shot at John Brown because it is a 4-game slate. And if John Brown does catch a 60-yard touchdown, which is certainly in his locker, it's something you're going to need to have on your teams. But I just don't see much here. Maybe a running back gets 2 touchdowns on the Ravens. Like, to me, it's just those two. I want Lamar and I want the D.
Gus Edwards and Dixon are meh plays. I think I prefer other guys, but Edwards, if he was involved in the passing game, would be enticing. Dixon, they definitely like him. So it's tough. The one guy in the there's 2 guys in the Chargers. I don't think either are even close to consideration in cash, but in tournaments, Keenan Allen, they priced him down for the matchup. He probably has. I mean, the one area you'd want to attack the Ravens would be from the slot. He should get peppered with targets. But the problem is how many snaps. And the one guy I'm definitely going to play if the Chargers can get past this game in the future is Mike Williams. Mike Williams had a really underrated season and always has a high floor, or a high ceiling, I should say. Great opportunity, great jump ball guy in the red zone. We saw a ton of deep balls to him this year. So he's the prototypical tournament player, but almost impossible to pull the trigger on him versus the Ravens. But he's probably going to be under 5% owned, Adam. So any luck for the Chargers? I think Keenan Allen's the one guy you could say, hey, there might be enough equity here.
Yeah, no, I think it sounds like I like Keenan Allen a little bit more than you guys. Like, this is a talented offense. To say they're going to go in there and score like only 7 points the whole game, I think would be a mistake. So I'm a little higher on Keenan and Melvin than you guys, but certainly, I mean, one of the hardest possible spots that you could be in, and play volume, obviously, with the way Lamar and the Ravens are playing is a major concern. But, remember that game, was that last year or 2 years ago when the Jaguars played the Steelers and like nobody played, or very few people played Steelers because the Jaguars defense at that time was like historically great. And the game ends up 45-42 or something. You remember?
Yeah. It's just harder for the Ravens to put up that kind of points. I mean, the Jaguars obviously still played Bortles, but he had shown, especially in garbage time, he could start throwing the rock around. It's harder to see a really high-scoring game, but I do like Keenan Allen. I mean, 6,900, they did price him down.
Yeah. So, we'll see. Just a really good real football game, though. 2 really good teams, I think.
Totally agree.
Yeah, this weekend's really good for real football, but it's just not fun from a fantasy perspective, especially from a DFS perspective. Next weekend gets more fun with Kansas City and Los Angeles and the Saints. Like, now you get the highest teams, higher totals. The Patriots too. All the offenses next week. It's like defense wins championships, but the best offensive teams are playing on the second week.
Right. Well, speaking of good defenses, last game on the slate is going to be Eagles at Bears. Bears do have some advantages here in the passing game, but that's the news and notes we need to look to here, Adam. Obviously, we don't have a ton of clarity on Thursday, but the receivers for the Bears right now, a lot of news and notes.
Yeah, no, they're actually fine. I mean, the Bears were pretty adamant that Taylor Gabriel, Anthony Miller, Allen Robinson are all healthy. They'll all be out there. And that, is one of the problems with the Bears. I've been paralyzed all year with Bears because I never know which one to play. I think Allen Robinson is the best, but he's typically the most expensive. Anthony Miller doesn't always see enough of the target share, and Taylor Gabriel has shown a pretty low ceiling lately, even though he plays a lot. Then they also have Trey Burton. They also have Tariq Cohen. Adam Shaheen is healthy, I believe. There's just like a lot going on with the Bears. And then Trubisky is really uneven. He's had some amazing games, and we know he can rush the football, which gives him a higher ceiling, I think. But yeah, I mean, it's tough on the Bears side for sure. Other injury note, Nick Foles took a shot to the ribs in week 17, but he's limited right now, but he's going to be fine. Obviously, the way that I think both teams should attack, but definitely the Eagles should attack us through the air. I mean, their run game is so bad. They have no chance at running against this Bears front. So I don't mind the spot for Alshon Jeffrey in a revenge game. The Bears perimeter pass defense is good, but they face a lot of targets because they're even better against tight ends and running backs. So I think Alshon is at least interesting. He's shown decent chemistry with Foles.
Thoughts on Nick Aguilar at his price, 3,800. He's run 117 more routes in the 8 games since Golden Tate joined the team than Tate.
Yeah. I mean, they hate Tate. They give a 3rd-round pick for a guy they're not even playing. So I've heard worse ideas, yeah.
I like Aguilar.
It's a price-ish play, right?
Yeah.
Like, what does he need to do for you at 3,800? The reason you're playing the sub 4K wide receivers is because they're getting some reasonable volume and allow you to fit in the higher priced guys that you need on a slate like this, especially in tournaments. I think that allocation to Aguilar is not unfounded. Now, to me, with the Bears playing at home, you mentioned Trubisky's up and down nature, and when Trubisky has an up game, it's because Tariq Cohen has an up game, typically speaking. And if he is going to have that up game, we have to assume that it's going to come against a team that has allowed teams to do things with their running backs. Well, Philadelphia is that team. They've allowed 110 running back receptions this year, tied for 2nd in the league. 80.9% of their passes to running backs against them are completed. 10 times this year, a running back has gone over 50 yards receiving or caught a pass for a touchdown against Philly. And 10 times this season, a running back has caught 5+ passes against Philly. So if there is a trigger for us to realize that this could be a Cohen game, it's Philly's defense that allows you and forces you to push balls not just outside the hashes to wide receivers, but also dump offs to running backs and targets to running backs.
Yeah, the Bears have an incredible matchup in the passing game. The reason I reference all the receivers, we were hoping that maybe one of them would be out and it'd be easier to have an idea of who to play with a condensed target share. But now you have a ton of challenges. I do think Cohen is the safest of the Bears pass catchers. Obviously, he's still running back, could get a couple carries, but he does most of his damage in the passing game. I was also excited to take a stroll down Narrative Street and play Jeffrey and Trey Burton, who is another tight end that we haven't talked about. But now, with all the receivers healthy and all these guys, it's very hard to project a lot of opportunity. I think all of us were really high on Trey Burton coming into the year in this Nagy offense, and he has not seen the volume that we anticipated. So it's a tricky spot. I do think I really like the Bears position, and I think the Eagles receivers are good value. But again, it's going into Chicago against a really tough defense. Adam, do you have a preference on any of these Chicago receivers or potentially Trey Burton, Cohen? How are you handling those?
Yeah, no, I like Tariq Cohen. Al's points are very valid about how the Eagles have struggled against pass catching running backs. They've used linebackers a lot of times on them. We'll see if they choose to use Malcolm Jenkins on Tariq Cohen in this game. But even if they don't, that could open things up for Trey Burton. There was an article in The Athletic about that today, about how the Eagles are going to match up with the Bears. So we'll see, man. I mean, it's really interesting. I think one of the hard parts about projecting the Bears is like Nagy makes his game plans on like a week-to-week basis. It's not like he's going to do the same thing every week. So on paper, I think it should be a pass-heavy attack. It should use Cohen a lot. We'll see if Nagy agrees, though.
Yeah, Jordan Howard finally erupted recently. So he's been a frustrating player to own all season, but finally a big game. And Bears defense and Howard would be another stack that you could do. I think the passing stacks are going to be a little more popular and have a little more equity, but if you wanted just a small piece of this game, you could go Howard and the Bears defense.
Howard's gotten really good volume recently, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just touchdown scoring, but like 21 carries, 13 carries with 2 catches, 19 carries, 19 carries. He's getting really good volume. And then you add in the 4 touchdowns he scored the last 3 weeks, and it becomes, okay, he's only 4,600 playing at home and favored.
Right. Mm-hmm. He's just not the prototypical DraftKings back that we target. But we have a tricky slate here. Adam Rao, any final thoughts? Do we want to do a conviction play? You got
conviction play on a 4-game slate? Are you out of your mind?
DeAndre Hopkins, Ezekiel Elliott.
I was going to give Ezekiel
Lamar
Elliott
Jackson.
help
Those
out.
are the 3 conviction plays.
All right, no conviction play. Any final thoughts? I mean, it's 2019. Give the people something, dude.
Final thoughts are no listener league. It has been canceled until next year. Was a good run. Was fun while it lasted. You guys, I mentioned on the solo pod, the listeners are #HowRich. They passed on overlay in a rake-free tournament. I mean, you got to be really rich to pass on overlay in a rake-free tournament, but listeners did. So we'll see you for week 1 listener league. And yeah, from a podcast scheduling note, we will have 1 more 3-man pod next week to close it out. We will have 2 more solo pods to close it out. And then I don't know. We'll see where the wind takes us, Al. And I have committed to play Al in Fortnite sometime after the Super Bowl. I don't know.
Al in
play with
Fortnite.
Al. Okay.
Yeah, not against me. We're going to be on the same team, and we are going to shuttle you, escort the VIP, transport the asset to a win in Fortnite on stream.
I don't even know the rules because I've watched some of this on like when people post stuff on. Are you like, I don't even know if we should talk about this now, but I can't even follow what's going on. It looks like you're building like a building as you're flying through the air and shooting zombies at the same time. Is that really what's going on?
Okay, 1, there's no zombies.
Or shooting someone.
2, there is a little bit of flying through the air. 3, yes, you are shooting people. And 4, yes, you can build things. We're going to take care of all of that for you. If we encounter some bad guys, we're going to build a little hut around you and protect you, and we will fight the bad guys. And then we will let you out of your little house that we build, and we will transport you to go. It's kind of Hunger Games-y, the game. Okay?
Yeah.
Everybody's in there. It's called the Battle Royale. Yeah. They drop everybody onto this island. Nobody has any weapons. Then you got to collect weapons, and the just like the blinds increase in poker, the circle gets smaller and forces action, and we're going to try and escort you to a win. And then dance.
The only thing I understood in that entire rant was poker. Not Hunger.
Poker.
Not Hunger
you said
Games.
Poker. It's like poker.
All right, it's enough. Enough zombie killing talk.
Al, get us out of here. The show's getting completely off the rails.
Well, guys, it's a 4-game slate. Like we already said, it's going to be a week that's going to be tough because of the defensive matchups that are out there. It's the playoffs. There's always going to be tough DVP. These teams that are left are really good at stopping what we look to try and accomplish in fantasy. So do what you have to do. Trust that process. And for Adam, for Pete, and producer Luke, I'm out. Till next week.
We are promoters at DraftKings and also avid fans. Our usernames are Adam Levitan, Al Smizzle, and CSU Ram 88. We may sometimes play on our personal accounts in the games that we offer advice on. Although we have expressed our personal view on the games and strategies in this podcast, they do not necessarily reflect the views of DraftKings, and we also may deploy different players and strategies than what we recommended in this podcast.